And so, right now, without delaying it, it is my honor and privilege to present to you our resource speaker for our colloquium, our virtual colloquium series. Right now, we're having this 2022-02, the second this year, um, to present the title Literature Gap, Topic Selected. Our speaker is a doctor of education and career classroom teacher working who blends critical theory and social justice technology. And with over 25 years of teaching experience, he is actively working with students to continue and expand the constructionist work. And he is active in research, classroom, discussion groups, publishing, inventing, and also on Twitter. A doctorate, a holder of doctorate degree in educational leadership for social justice, a teacher researcher in Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California, USA. Our attendees, AQRA family, help me welcome our resource speaker, Dr. Bryan P. Sanders.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. It's it's an honor, and I'm grateful. So I have some thoughts to share with you today. The the context of it is really kind of really in my bio there, but that I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for many years, and I value that experience. And yes, it's I'm a night owl. It's 1 o'clock in the morning here in Los Angeles, and in my years of working with students, I've always been sort of interested in trying to find new things to do. So somewhere around 2015, 2016, I went back to one of my professors that I had at Loyola Marymount University in the late 1990s, asking, what are you working on? What's the cool project that you've got going on? And we talked a bit, and he, sort of dared me into entering a doctoral program. And I thought it was kind of a silly idea, but we talked about it some more, and then it started to make sense to me, really because I saw the possibility to do something that was really grounded in the work, my experience as a teacher. So that's what I want to talk to you about today, because what happened for me in my doctoral journey was that I found that something was there, that I could feel it because I had experienced it as a classroom teacher, and I kept looking for it, having did anybody write about this, and I couldn't quite find it. So I want to share this with you today and hopefully inspire you to dig into something that's meaningful for you and your experience, and to develop your own theory or your own approach, and provide it for the world to read and to use. So if all goes well, I believe you should be able to see my PowerPoint here. So I saw that there was a gap in the literature. I was looking for something in particular, and the more I read, the more I was convinced it wasn't there. And so I, with the help of my other professors, circling around me and being my support team, decided that I would work on filling that gap. So this is probably something you have experienced. You've probably stumbled onto a topic that you really love, and you're obsessed with that topic. you can't stop thinking about that topic. And you find everything possible to read about the topic, and you go into the history, and you read everything that's old, you read everything that's current, and you're surrounded by this, and you know the names of the scholars who have worked on this thing. You start taking notes, and you have scribbled notebooks, and you have post-its everywhere, and everything that you're doing is just trying to wrap your head around how to complete your own dissertation, but also contribute something meaningful, right? So you have all these things going on, but you still have a lot of questions, because you know something is missing. And I certainly did this, and I would go deep into the library and go deep into the internet, and I would talk to all kinds of people and figure out, maybe this is it, maybe that's it. What I discovered is that there are times, and I had this happen, and it might happen for you, where you will have to write whatever it is that you think is missing. It's now your job. You have found the gap in the literature, and now you have found your topic and the thing that you need to do. There are a lot of problems here, because how do you do that? What on earth? How? There aren't that many roadmaps. You have to find your own. And what I'm going to offer you today is a roadmap that I made for myself, and it may not work for you, but if it does, great, use it. Some parts of it work for you, use those. None of it works for you, hopefully it's just an entertaining talk then. So I'm going to share this with you. You can have this, take it, it's yours. This is what I did. So, and this will make a little bit more sense, because I'll show you an example of what I did. I'll show you all the steps. But you've got your problem, and you read the history, you're reading your literature, you're pulling everything together. You're looking to the existing frameworks and methodologies out there and trying to organize yourself. And then from there, it seems pretty clear that, you could probably write some good research questions at this stage. And you again, maybe you know all these things, but it's always good to talk about these things. A research question that can be answered with yes or no, it's not much of a research question, right? So you want to always find something that gets you to think in a lot of ways. And then here's where I started to veer off into my own path. And I started to create some descriptor codes, but I created these things, and I'll show you my examples, based on what I was reading and the history of the problem that I was interested in. I started to see a lot of things showing up more than once. And so I needed a common language to talk about that. So I created my own language. Those are my descriptor codes. And then from there, I wanted to do something that would contribute to the field in a new way and fill the literature gap. But I didn't want to be, obnoxious about it and egocentric about it. I wanted to honor everything that came before me. So I found 3 important books. One by John Dewey, Democracy and Education, written in 1916. One by Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, written in 1970. And Mind Storms, written by Seymour Papert in 1980. And these three seminal texts became the heart of my work. And so I read these books, and I would tag every time I saw something that was relevant to my descriptor codes. I would tag these passages. Of course, I was reading the book, like trying to absorb it, but I would like read a chapter and then go back and tag things. Then I pulled all of those passages out, and then because as I stated in the beginning, I was really interested in using my experience in the classroom. I built an analysis of the passages that I pulled from these texts. I used my experience to then further analyze the importance of these passages and how they might play out in a modern context, based on what I'm doing here as a classroom teacher in Los Angeles. The final thing I did, because I was focused on computers and computing in a new way, blended with critical theory and constructivism, I then used computer software. Specifically, I used the program called Deduce. You've probably encountered it. There may be others, but I found Deduce to be quite good, to help me see things that I couldn't see just with my human eyes, because sometimes you just need another brain. And really that was kind of like at the heart of a lot of my work with kids and computers and rethinking school, was that the computer should be a brain that the human brain works with. And most of what happens is that the kids, they work at the computer instead of work with the computer. So I needed to work with the computer in my study. So now I'm going to sort of take you through what I did, and just all the different steps. So I was fascinated by the problem. I'm still fascinated by. This is what I do. Computers and computing as an educational tool, as an educational environment. The early days of it have had such a lasting impact, and what I've found is that a lot of it had to do with these early days being focused on memorization and just answering simple questions, A, B, C, D, E answers, or yes, no, true, false answers, things like that. The other problem with this kind of relationship was that all of the outcomes were already set. Everything was predetermined. It limited your creativity because there really wasn't the purpose of using the computer. The purpose was to make sure that you got the right answer. And if you didn't, then to show you the right answer. And then it's just, it's a behavior machine, not so much a thinking machine. And looking at a broader history of computers in the classroom and computing in the classroom, when I was in elementary school in the 1980s, and the Apple II computers were here in California in classrooms. Not too many, but they were there. We played basically games, but they were, quote, educational games. And they were supposed to teach you about a particular topic or subject matter, or travel around the world and solve simple little game puzzles. So what happened then, the relationship of student learning with the computer involved, was that it was all about points and bells and whistles going off, and it really had nothing to do with, thinking and encouraging individuality. And again, this is kind of like my big social justice critical theory problem. The people who wrote the questions, the database that we asking kids to sort through is an imported database. So, the chances that the kids in the room are being actually met with content that is relevant to their lives, very small. So there's kind of an internal problem there. And then the other thing that I noticed as I was doing this back study on the history and the literature review connected to this was that there was a lot of people writing and excited all about constructivism and student-based learning and inquiry-based learning, and everyone thinks it's the greatest thing ever. But most of what you actually saw was really traditional and lots of standardized tests, and so things are at odds. And I saw that represented over and over again, both in the literature review and in the historical overview. And you can even see in these pictures here, some of these are 80s and then 90s, and then also more modern pictures, like with things with like Kahoot and Quizlet Live. These are like really popular software products today, but really they're just encouraging a lot of quizzing and gaming of points earned and racing to get the right answer. So we really missed the opportunity to work with the computer, which is like sort of mind-boggling to me. The most powerful tool ever created by human beings. We put it in schools and nobody knows how to use it. Well, some people know how to use it, but as an institution, school has really failed at having the computer be much more than just digital paper or a faster way to move things around. So out of this, I started to look for my, what would be my framework. I used a constructivist framework because that made the most sense for me, because, I'm as a teacher every day, I'm like working with my students, and I wanted to really honor that in this dissertation that I worked on, right? So it's all about using the constructivist framework to help shape a new approach. And asking my research questions was really easy for me, because I was just like so taken by the problem. Like, look at the history of a behavioral approach, a cognitivist approach, versus what hopefully could be a constructivist approach. How has that impacted the development of using computers in the classroom as a transformational tool? And for me, I really like the heart of what I want to do with this work has nothing to do with tests or grades or anything like that. It's about rethinking the classroom, rethinking the school, rethinking graduation outcomes, and coming up with new ideas, things that we can't even predict. That to me is more exciting. So I knew at this point, when I was deep into my study, there's no way I'm not gonna be able to sample 10 kids or 20 kids or run any kind of study like that in a quantitative way. This is obviously a qualitative study, but what I saw was there's something I have to be the one to write the thing that I want to read. So my methodologies then started to emerge, and I said, okay, so somebody wrote a methodology for theory building, and it was perfectly fine, and I said, okay, that makes sense to me, I can use this. And then there was another methodology for document analysis, and that's how I borrowed to come up with this idea to write about these three texts. So taking all this energy and all this reading Then I just, you have to boil it down. You have to take it and make it usable, right? And the 155 excerpts, that's because I ended up from the 3 books. I could have used more, but I it was really hard. But I got it to 155 passages out of these 3 books, and I was pretty proud of getting it down to that. But these were my themes, my codes, the things that I saw over and over and over again in my history and in my literature review. And then I use these, I'm not going to read them for you, but you could see them here. I use these to then go into the primary source material to read the actual books cover to cover and say, okay, well, this is an important passage and it's connected to this descriptor code. And then as I started to sort of boil this down more and more, and here are the books, of course. These are my heart and soul books here. And then, of course, there are more, but at a certain point, and you'll find this in your work, at a certain point you have to just shut the door. You have to say, this is it. Because if you take on any more, you'll never finish your dissertation. You'll never finish your research study, your research paper. You just won't. So I had to position myself, and this is where what I ended up coming up with, my theory, comes from these 3 main books. So, and if you haven't read these, you should read all of them. They're great. But so my theory was a critical theory and a technology and constructivist theory all blended together. So, Freire's the critical theory seminal text, and Dewey's book is the just sort of seminal constructivist text, and Pappert's book is the seminal technology computing text. But interestingly, it connects really deeply into Dewey and Freire quite well. And that's actually a lot of what I saw was there would be people writing articles about Dewey and Freire, or there'd be people writing articles about Dewey and Papert, or there'd be people writing articles about Freire and Papert, but I hadn't seen anybody who combined all 3. And to me, it just made so much sense that these 3 should be in a paper. So I had to do that. And then as I sort of boiled this down further, and I started to have to find a way, okay, so I have too many descriptor codes, I have too much data, I need to get my data to be more usable. Then I thought, okay, so what I was doing actually was tagging passages more than once anyway. So then I found, okay, these were the pairs of codes that were happening more than anything else. And so, these 6 pairs of descriptor codes that I had developed from my history and literature review and applied them to my passages in those 3 books, these became my significant themes, right? This was okay, this is the heart of my work. It's obviously about destroying the banking model of education and creating institutional change, and and decrying the problems of predetermined outcomes, and trying to create greater social impact, and to engage students in this constructivist model, right? It's all right there. That's the heart and soul of my work in this one particular big dissertation piece of work, which is, how it is. It's a big thing. It's when you're in it, you're really in it. So, these shouldn't be that surprising. I won't read these. You can read them, but these won't be surprising that this is what sort of emerged as the big things to try to work on that I was, seeing over and over again. And then, things that I didn't predict, that I couldn't see until I was actually in the study, and reading everything, were things like, people were writing about this like severe mismatch of the teachers in the classroom and their experience levels with technology just being so different from the kids coming into the room that it actually created like such a cognitive dissonance for the kids that like they just couldn't comprehend like how is it possible that teachers want to like take my laptop and take my cell phone away from me. It was like to them like they get it, like they know that this is you have to be able to use these things and use them well and use them purposefully. So how can we do that without making it all about punishment? And there were quite a few pieces written about that. I didn't realize that people had studied that, but I was excited because it spoke directly to a lot of what I was sensing. Because like I whenever there was like a new software, or even today, like still teaching, whenever there is a new software, a new hardware product, or a new game, or new whatever it is that the kids are talking about, like I want to know because I want to use that and I want to figure it out and see if there's a way that there's an equation in there that sort of leads me to connect to their world. So I ended up forming this. I checked everywhere. This term didn't exist, and so I ended up creating this phrase, critical techno constructivism, and that's the title, sort of like the main title of my work. And it's trying to unify different learning theories with computers in order to create, a revitalized classroom experience and new schools, and then who knows what happens after that? A new society, a new world. I don't really know. The point is, we don't know. And these are some sort of the tenets of my theory, things that I believe and things that I work on, either through my work with my students or through parent education, talking to colleagues such as yourselves, or writing articles and things like that. But they're looking back, like to a lot of this is like, well, yeah, I think I probably believed this before I did my study, right? So going back to, the beginning of my story where I went to see my professor, he says, you should get a doctoral degree. I was like, what would I want to do that for? Like, I probably believed all these things. I just didn't have them formalized. So I'm grateful for the experience to now be able to look at this and years of work and reading and suffering and enjoying the suffering that you can enjoy, to look at this and say, yeah, this is what I think, this is what I believe. It's published and other people can read it and hopefully help change the world and make classrooms more interesting and more engaging and more meaningful. And and all of this came out of reading and studying and discovering that what I wanted to share with the world just wasn't there. Again, some other, like just sharing with you some other sort of little gems that came out of my work that I was excited about, that felt really important then, they still do now. We don't talk about this a lot. We a lot of times, like, we'll just download a new product, or a school will buy, a new curriculum package. And then, sure, it goes through vetting, yeah, obviously. But you can't vet everything. You're not going to read every question. You're not going to really read every passage. And, so there's kind of just like this real interesting, terrible problem of like importing classroom materials from other places. And, they're closed loops, like the kids in the room, or at any age, I guess, the students in the room are, they're sort of subjected to the information, and they're not necessarily part of the conversation. Their narrative is not necessarily part of what is being honored in the room, and so it's really dangerous in a lot of ways to just assume that we could read the work and use the questions and answers from other places, textbooks, and assume that it's going to actually be good for your students. That's a big if. I would say it's probably going to be a losing battle, and that there are a lot of conditions in schools that end up recreating some of the very same social justice problems, the inequities in the world, get recreated in the classroom in a lot of ways, and certainly the material choice and honoring people's lives in the room is one big way that happens. And so, turning that on its head and like using critical techno-constructivism to like reinvigorate working with computers and working with students in a brand new way, and let their interests and their inquiries guide where you go. Like, now that's a very different kind of classroom. And the ways that we arrange space, the requirements that students use a computer at a particular time. It's crazy. They should be. It should be. You don't police how often your students pick up their pencils, right? The same should be true of the computer. There should be no set time that the computer is allowed to be used. It should just be a normal tool that's part of what we would use to do work. As simple as that. But that seems to be a very difficult thing to have happen in schools, and I can't really figure it out. But I'm working on it. So that, so there are a lot of things that come out of this. And now, so let me just say this one more time, because it's really important. If there's something missing, and there is, I'm sure there is something missing in what you're studying, you can definitely write what is missing. It is within your power to do that. And so if you use anything here, if you come up with a better way, like, let me know. I would love to hear what you have to say. If you came up with a different roadmap, you're like, oh my God, hey Bryan, I tried yours, it didn't work for me. I did this. I think it's better. Here, now you can take my roadmap. That would be really. I love that kind of stuff. I love to have that kind of critical thought. So hopefully this was interesting and helpful, inspiring to you somehow. But again, it's this idea that something is not there and you keep looking for it. That's probably a sign that you need to rethink your whole project and be the one to fill that literature gap. So that's my presentation. Maybe there are some questions. I'll be sticking around.
Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Sanders, for such relevant and comprehensive presentation on the area of literature gap and in the selection also of the topic. At this point in time, we will be accommodating some of the questions posted by our attendees in the Q&A box. And I would like to request Dr. David to post these questions. And I would like also to encourage other our attendees, if you have also some clarifications, you may also post your questions in our Q&A box. Um, Dr. Sanders, while Dr. David is preparing to post the question, I have this personal question first. In the selection of topic, there are some factors you need to consider, right? You may consider your personal interest on the topic, and you have also to consider its relevance, available time, your access to data, and also the available resources. In your experience, Dr. Sanders, what do you consider most important consideration in the selection of topics?
That's a great question. I mean, I the one that I settled on was definitely not my first. I will admit, it was definitely not my first topic. I think what started to happen was, I just let myself wander and try, to. I guess I should say it like this. I struggled to write a 5-page summary of a lot of topics. But this one, it just kind of fell out of me. And so I think I think you have to know yourself enough to know, like, I would like the idea of that about this one, but it's just, I can't do it. And it's not because it's not because I can't do it ever. I just can't do it right now. And so, I recommend that everybody just, if there's a topic and you're talking about it to everybody, and you're reading everything possible, and you're making crazy long lists of everybody's last name and their, web address and their email, like, that's your topic. So it's got, the passion really has to be there.
Yeah, that's also some of us have this hard time looking for their topic, but others also have a hard time selecting on their numerous topics. And thank you for sharing with us, Doctor.
I would say one more thing about that. That is, like, a lot of times, I think people they wait for some advice from somebody else, and that may not be the right choice either. It's almost like the same problem where you importing a solution from somewhere else. You have to work with what's in front of you. So I would just recommend you just wait for it and try writing about it. Like, I wrote a lot of stuff that I threw out. So just write and see if something emerges from that.
That's correct. Okay. Allow me to read. We have 3 questions in the Q&A box, and let me start with the question with the most thumbs up. We have a question from Mom Janet Espada. Her question is, what do you suggest could be a practical, appropriate way we can address the absence or scarcity of literature on the topic we're working on?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, one way is to do what I did and write, the missing thing. But I see this a lot where, you can basically put into your paper that you recognize that there's a gap in the literature, and you acknowledge it. You've done. I think the for me, the problem with it though is, like, how would you ever really know? Like, did you actually look at every possible place? Like, so if you know for a fact that you're not going to write the missing literature, but you need something that you hope somebody has written, but it hasn't been written. I think you have to document where you're looking and like really, be diligent about the databases you're searching, and just document those. And, so that way, in case anybody ever wanted to follow your tracks, not that, because to me, like, this work should be so that we leave it behind for someone else to, see if whether or not there's something to do that hasn't been done, right? So like, even if you're not filling a literature gap, let's just say you're just writing your study, you're still going to leave suggestions for other people because you didn't do everything, right? So I'm giving a very long answer to this. Document which databases you went into and what your search terms were. And I think that is the most practical and appropriate way to address the absence. Just like literally be like a super strict science-based approach. Like, I looked in here and I searched these terms, and I didn't find anything relevant, to this topic. That's what I would do.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sanders. Let's have the second question. Oh, we have a question coming from Dr. Dolph Overholster. Okay, the question of Dr. Dolph is, in your experience, how much time should a graduate student give themselves for discovering the gap and finalize on a topic? And the follow-up question is, are there any ways to reduce the time it takes?
Okay, I'm only laughing because I'm remembering the number of professors who were just so fed up with me because I took as much time. I went to the last day where you're supposed to turn in, like, this is it, this is my actual topic, and there's no changing it. So in my class, my graduating class, and it was a small cohort of 18 students, but it was nice. We all really knew each other. But in that group, I was the one who changed my topic the most. And I just waited I didn't wait. I used every last possible minute to finalize it. I was just forced. I mean, I probably could have kept going, except for the fact that the program is a 3-year program. So, I did my very, very best to look for something that was what I ended up creating, and I just didn't see anything. And and if I missed it, then I missed it in an honest way. So I think, it's again, documenting things and being really strict with yourself is important in this kind of work. I think a lot of times there's especially in like it's a different experience researching on the internet versus researching physically in a library. There's just something about the experience of touching all the paper in the library that feels sometimes more serious than just sitting at home on your computer. So I recommend that you just ignore the differences between those two, because it's really the same. It should be serious in both, and you just document literally everything. And if you have to change a lot of times your topic, then that's okay, because you're looking for something that you want to spend kind of like the rest of your life as a researcher really focusing on, because this is a big deal. A dissertation should be a big, big deal. And are there ways to reduce the time it takes? Don't ask. You're asking the wrong guy, because if I needed to know the answer to that question, it didn't happen for me.
Yeah, thank you. I think the point is quality works are a product also of time, right? Of great time.
Yeah. I mean, you can't rush it, even though you want to. Because you want to just be settled, and I understand that. I'm somebody I'm okay with ambivalence and things being a little chaotic until they're settled. And other people don't like that feeling, and I respect that. I, I just don't have a practical way to fix that problem.
Okay. I think we have another question. I think this is the last.
Okay.
Okay, we have our question from Constantino Baliena. The question is, the critical techno-constructivism theory that resulted from your study is interesting indeed. How do you intend to buttress this theory in your subsequent research undertakings?
Thank you. Yeah, that's. I ended up just really, quite literally, using my own work to then shift what I do in the classroom, and you know, and that solution made a lot of sense for me, because from the beginning of my whole story into becoming Dr. Sanders, I used to just be Bryan Sanders, now I'm Dr. Bryan Sanders, right? So that change is, built on the idea that I want to use this stuff. I want to create ideas and then make them usable. So I started to shift what I would do with my students and how I construct different learning experiences for them. And I was already pretty constructivist based anyhow, but now I have really shifted a lot of my practice and a lot of how I talk and think about the work, because there's teachers are interesting people, and a lot of times I think we end up doing things the way that they were done to us, even if we didn't like it at the time as students. Just like as a net, we slip into it very easily. And so I started to see a really big shift when I started to develop this theory, and how I would try to ground my talk and my work and my interactions with my students in the theory itself. And the theory itself, of course, is built on the work of giants in the field of education. So it I don't feel like it's just mine, but it's definitely how I am trying to change into a different sort of teacher. And then to also answer your question, other things I'm doing, I've been writing other papers, investigating other things. I'm supposed to be writing a book that I don't know. I started to write it, and maybe if you all cheer me on, I'll get back to it. But I really want to write this book about using Minecraft, and I've written chapters about it, I've written articles about it, but I have a big book idea, and it's grounded in critical techno-constructivism, and it's about, basically Minecraft is the school. And doesn't mean you have to always be in Minecraft, but you can use the philosophy of an open sandbox approach with building blocks in anything that you do. So I'm working on other projects. I have another project where actually to try to teach families how to talk to their local schools and basically do what we do here. Can you imagine if this kind of conversation were, like in a shorter version, but like for parents to go talk to their school leaders about what's happening in the classroom or what they want to see happening in the classroom? Like, to me, that would be really quite important and beautiful. So things like that. Those are the kinds of things that I'm working on next out of my theoretical work. Something definitely more practical work.
God bless to your next endeavors, Dr. Bryan. And that, I guess that's the last question. And in behalf of the AQRA community, we are so grateful for sharing your expertise with this afternoon. And may allow me to present this certificate of recognition for your valuable service, our resource speaker, and the topic literature gov topic selected. And this is signed by Dr. Arceli Rosario, the ACRA president. And it's also signed by Dr. Padosov Gob, our chief operating officer, and also with David Lumowa, the chief financial officer of ACRA. Again, Dr. Bryan, thank you
Thank you.
so much. I'm now turning back the virtual floor to Dr. Saban.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brian Sanders, for that insightful talk on the topic, and also Sir Ranzuline for facilitating the Q&A, and Dr. David as well. At this